All right, cool. Well, this is Andrew again, once again, and I am also joined this time by Mark.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Mark. And today we're going to be going through the cars from Dis. So last time we went through Brobnar, and I know a few people took a look at that video, so hopefully some people will find this useful as well. And just like we did there, we're going to start with some discussion. So, Mark,
Let's
when you,
let's do
oh yeah,
this.
okay, oh man, that is, oh, dad jokes. Uh, I'll allow it. Okay.
Sorry, I could not resist.
No, yeah, no one can. It's almost like you were weak and being controlled. Um,
Foreshadowing.
yeah, you could have even had a color of domination, subordination, one of those.
Subordination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So so the first question that I wanted to answer, or that I wanted to ask you, is when uh, you open up your Call of the Archons deck, you see Dis printed there. What are you hoping that Dis will let you do? What are the things that you're thinking it might allow this deck to be good at?
Hmm. Definitely. Lots of disruption. Lots of control.
Hmm.
Um. That's basically what this is all about. And according to my wife Kelly, it is a very mean house.
Yes, yes, it is a component in the mean deck, is it not?
Yes. Yeah. This is a component in lots of mean decks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say for sure there's a lot of disruption. It could take the form of discarding, making your opponent discard, shoving stuff back into your opponent's hand, taking control of their stuff, or generally limiting their choices. Um,
Whether it be cards or amber,
yeah,
whichever this.
yeah, or even active house.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Sometimes it's aimed at you, but mostly it'll be aimed at your opponent. There's some just complete wipe the board effects, as well as some purge and uh, some amber denial too. Yeah, like you were alluding to. I think for people coming from, so Mark, you didn't ever, I don't think, play Magic the Gathering. In Magic the
I did
Gathering,
not.
yeah, in Magic, there's one of the colors is blue, and blue is people get mad when they're playing against blue because it's a very similar set of effects. It controls what the other player can do. It limits their options and just generally uh, slows their game plan down and leads to sometimes grindy, uh, very contentious games.
Okay.
So yeah, same as Dis. Cool. What is your favorite combo in Dis?
Give me a second, Andrew. You're gonna have to cut this.
Okay,
Give me a second.
okay.
Can you hear the pen that I've been playing with?
The pen?
Yeah. Oh, you can't hear it. Okay.
No.
Cool. Um. Um. Okay. So, sorry. Favorite
No.
combo.
Okay. So yeah. So do you have a favorite combo in Dis?
I do. I have a few favorite combos.
Mm-hmm.
The one that immediately came to mind for me was Key Hammer combined with either Drumble,
Hmm.
Charette, or Lash of Broken Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
All three of those allow you to take a key away from your opponent, whether it be their first or second one. Obviously, if it's the third one, you're out of luck. But
Mm-hmm.
um, but um, being able to take a key away from them, put them behind, and then capture either capture amber to get them below forging cost or increasing the forging cost past what they can
Yeah.
afford.
Yeah.
A A couple of other ones that came to mind
Mhm.
was just multiple mind barbs discarding random cards out of their hand,
Mhm.
or and either that combined with or separate from multiple toxins, being able to also reap, gain amber, and discard cards out of your opponent's hand.
Yeah.
My personal favorite combo would be Screaming Cave and multiple Control the Weaks.
Uh-huh.
Uh, when you're able to get lucky and pull a Control the Weak every couple of turns with a Screaming
Yeah.
Cave, it is so much fun.
Not not for the other person. Uh, yeah, no, that can be crazy, and I think I love the Keyhammer Lash of Broken Dreams combo because you can even sometimes get into a situation where you make them spend 9 and then give them 6 back to by unforging the key, and then bump the cost up to 9 again, and just really make them sad. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my personal favorite combo is Snudge and Tocsin. If you have them both out, you can be, every turn shove a card back into their hand, including artifacts. That's good artifact control. And then with Tocsin, you're putting things in the bin. If the thing you're putting back in their hand is just to annoy them, you might use Tocsin first. But if you have a really high value target, somebody dropped their Nepenthe Seed, or uh, you know something else like an Omni Potion, um, you're thinking, hey, I just want this. I don't want this on the board. I don't want it coming back on the board. Sometimes you can put it back in their hand and then use Toxin to if you get lucky and hit it and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get something else, it's still not a bad thing. So that combination I've found can really lock people down and limit their options very very hard.
Oh, yes, definitely, definitely. Snudge can be pretty powerful card when it's able to be kept out
Yeah.
past its first turn being laid out.
Yep. And then last question before we jump into the comments. When you open up a deck, you see this. What house would you most like to see next to it?
I have two different options
Mm-hmm.
that I usually look for, and I usually like to see these three houses together. I only
Mm-hmm.
have a couple of decks with this, or I don't even know if I have more than one, but either shadows or logos or
Mm-hmm.
both.
Okay.
There's lots of amber control in
Mm-hmm.
shadows, and
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of turn control in logos. So being able to archive cards for bigger combos with logos, or being able to simply say you put out a Drumble in Dis, they destroy it, get back a bunch of amber, and then bait and switching them with
Right.
shadows or something like
Right.
that. So being able to combo houses like that is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I put down shadows. Same thing. Like if you can uh, slow them down with disc, control them to the point where they burst up really far in a single turn, so that you hopefully won't be able to stop them. And then the next turn, have a good shadows turn. It can just be really devastating. And I think anytime you sit down across from somebody and they have dis and shadows, it's a really good idea to uh, look for that type of situation, and you're probably going to have a bad time. Um, cool. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump into the cards. Then we'll start with the commons, and the first one, or we'll start with the common actions. So the first one I have here is fear, and fear just returns an enemy creature to its owner's hand. Simple.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Fear. Um. Sorry. I am.
That's okay. I'll jump in. I
Sorry. I wasn't expecting to start with fear. I have a rise first on mine.
oh, you
But
must have sorted alphabetically.
I
I
sort by number.
oh,
Sorry. I should
I don't
order
know. No,
alphabetically.
no. You're right. I did a terrible thing, but we're gonna go with it. I'm gonna stick with fear. Uh,
So,
Hey, this is thematic for discs. Okay, you thought we were gonna do a certain order, but no.
oh my goodness, yeah, just messing with my brain.
Yep. Yep.
Just like that guy on Fear's
Yeah.
art.
Yeah.
That's how I feel right now.
Not a happy Martian. So okay. Well, I will just say I think the thing to watch out for with fear is probably if the thing that you are using fear on has a play ability, it's probably not a good target for fear. You probably want to target something that uh, is going to be inconvenient for them to have to put back out. They're going to put it back out, and it's going to sit there exhausted for a turn. You slow them down that way. If you do this to a Shooler or something else that has a strong play effect, you could end up hurting yourself. Really rich target for this is Khalifi Dragon, because now you've ruined their plan, and now they have a dead card in their hand. Hopefully, depending on where they're at with their amber.
Another great one to target with fear is Troubadour. Really
Yeah.
costly to play Troubadour. It costs you 3 amber to play the card.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have that card returned to your hand, it is 3 amber down the drain.
Right. You don't get it back.
Pay it again to put
Yep.
that card back down, and you only get 5 to destroy it.
Yep.
So at that point, it is a total waste, and you just discard it at that point. But another good couple of cards to target with fear is anyone with taunt or shadow self.
Mm-hmm.
So if shadow self is next to a really good target, and you just fear to return shadow self, if that target is in the middle of the battle line, they won't be able to put shadow self back next to it.
Right.
Same with any taunt creature.
Mm-hmm.
So it exposes the creature to be able to be attacked or removed. So.
Yep. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, next one should have been the first one is Arise. It's an action. You play it. You choose a house. You return all your creatures of that house from your discard pile to your hand, and you get a chain.
Mm-hmm. So, Arise is like such a good card in this house.
Mm-hmm.
It is applicable for any, like, you can use it. You can Arise any house. It's really most powerful with when you call this with it, because you're able to play those creatures right back out. Every other house you need to wait a turn to play them back out.
Yep.
But even so, being able to take every creature back from the discard pile and at the cost of only 1 chain is a really good deal.
Yep. Yeah, I agree that it's best if you use it on discs and can jump stuff back out. I think if you get this early, it's often I will end up discarding it, but getting it mid to late game, it's very strong. And sometimes early if you already lost a strong creature. But if I get it, if I happen to have it in like my second turn hand or something like that, and I'm playing disc, there's a really good chance this gets discarded, but definitely very strong after that. Okay, next one. This is just a ridiculous card. Gateway to Dis. You destroy each creature, you gain 3 chains. And I don't think most games could afford. I think in most games a card like this would just be super broken.
Yes, being able to just reset the board, and not necessarily artifacts, but being able to reset a board full of creatures, especially when you're the one that's behind, and being able to just restart is such a good way to calm yourself down and be able to take the game back, because we've been in that situation where you see your opponent put out 5 creatures on 2 turns, and suddenly their battle line is 10 creatures, and you have 2, and there's you feel like there's nothing you can do, and then Gateway to Dish shows up, and you're like, oh, I can just reset this, boom, and it's super great. I have a deck with 2 of these in it, and I like being able to just reset the board a bunch of times is um, super awesome.
Yeah. So, and the flip side with this one, sometimes there are times where this would not be advantageous to play. The nice thing I feel like is most of the time when that occurs, I feel like, oh well, I'm in a good position anyway, so it doesn't feel
Right.
bad to have a dead card. This is definitely in a category where if you need it, it's very good, and if you don't need it, it's not really hurting you that much, probably.
Yeah, but every once in a while, like if I am ahead, I do not want to reset the board, so I just discard it.
Yep.
This one is usually pretty easy to play around.
So you discard discard.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and then next we have Hand of Dis. Hand of
What?
Dis. Hand of Dis. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically like a mini gateway to dis. Being able to just remove a creature from
Yeah.
play. Obviously, the qualifier is that it can't be on a flank.
Yeah.
So they need to have at least 3 creatures out in order for this to be useful. So
Yeah.
I do end up discarding this one more often than Gateway to Dis, but
Yep.
this one you can get rid of any creature. It doesn't matter whether they're under taunt or behind a shadow self or anything
Yep.
like that. You can just straight up get rid of them, and it doesn't give you any chains. So
Yeah.
really useful in the right situation.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. In the right situation, I think, if things are close, it's often the case that there aren't a lot of creatures out. And uh, one thing to consider, if you're playing against Dis, I will be strategic about what I put on a flank, and I'll try to keep my most important creatures on a flank so that they can't be targets for this. And there's other things you open yourself up to, um, but if I have creatures more than 2 creatures out and I'm playing against this, I usually try to be wary of this. But like you said, sometimes this doesn't work out, and that's okay.
It is really funny that you bring that up. I have found myself doing that a lot more often in games. Is
Hmm.
realizing that placement of your creatures, like when I put them out, I will usually put the less important one in the middle because there are other cards, like there's a Sanctum card that
Hmm.
stuns all creatures not on a flank. Um,
Hmm.
but at the same time, as we'll encounter later, there are ways you can combo Hand of Dis with something else, say like a
Yeah.
Snudge,
Yep.
who can only target creatures on a flank.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Yep. There can definitely be, but the slight difference there is that unless there's a speed sigil or something, the Snudge you get a turn to hopefully do something about it, whereas the Hand of Disc, you surprise. um,
Yeah.
so the next card here is Control the Weak. It is an action. It gains you 1 amber, and you choose a house from your opponent's identity card. So you can't choose just anything, but you have to choose one of their 3 houses, and that's what they have to choose.
I love this card. It is a iconic card for Dis. It's a extremely useful card,
Hmm.
especially, but it becomes more useful as the game goes on.
Hmm.
So, uh, but the moment your opponent reshuffles their deck, it becomes harder to know. But one thing I will always do before using this card is
Hmm.
check my opponent's discard pile to see what there is the
Hmm.
most of in there, and
Yep.
I will usually call that unless they happen, say the most card, unless in this situation where they have a lot of that house in the discard pile, but a bunch of those creatures on the board, I
Right.
probably won't call that one. So, being able to pick your opponent's house for them is an extremely strong ability, and I'm
Yep.
honestly surprised it doesn't have chains attached to it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think definitely this is there's a lot of upward room for this card in terms of skill play. Like you can really hurt somebody with this card if you have a combination of having thought things through really well and also getting lucky. Um, in I think checking the discard pile is always a good move. The other way I sometimes think about it is there a card I know could be in their deck that I really don't want them to play right now? Like if they have Dis and I have a strong board state, I might, and I know that they have Gateway to Dis in their deck or possibly in their hand, I might think, okay, I'm going to play Control the Weak and choose anything but Dis so they don't have an opportunity to play Gateway and I get another turn of board domination. So that's usually, I think discard pile is the right way to think about it. Sometimes there are some other considerations that might come into play too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Okay, next one. Mind Barb, gain an amber. They lose a card at random from their hand.
that
Pretty cool.
that face the Martian is making is
Yep.
usually the face I make when this happens to me. It's
Yep.
always out of the blue. You never know what's going to happen to you, and most of the time it's a card that you really need. So, it can be frustrating for this to be played on you, but at the same time, being able to just play on the side of playing it, being able to just play this card, gain an amber, and then if you happen to discard a good card from your opponent's hand, that's great. You obviously don't know whether it's a good card for them
Right.
until they start playing, but
Yeah.
it's a great card to just play right away.
The once in a while you can end up in a situation where you got a card they didn't particularly care about. It's not in the house they were going to play, and they get to draw another one. But I think generally speaking, it's frustrating to have played against you. It's good to play and feels fun. I think it's a really fun card as well.
Especially since it gives you an amber. That's a big thing.
Yep.
Being able to combo this with other cards that we'll talk about later, like Succubus, Tocsin, it can be very detrimental to your opponent's hand.
Yep. Cool. And then this one came up earlier. So the next one, we're getting into artifacts now. And so there's two common artifacts. The first one we'll cover is Lash of Broken Dreams. Lash of Broken Dreams, when you use it, it makes your opponent's keys cost 3 more during their next turn. So very nice for slowing them down. That's about it, right?
One thing I've noticed with this card is it is a common, so you do see it in quite a few decks. It's definitely not one you don't see in few decks. You see it in a lot. So, but the thing that you don't see comboed with this card a whole lot is other cards to combo with it. So a lot of times I've seen this sit on the board mainly unused, like for the most part unused, except if, say, I'm about to forge a key and my opponent has Lash of Broken Dreams. I have literally seen people use it as the only card that they use just to make my keys cost more for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So while it is a good card, it isn't all. From what I've seen people use it really well, and people use it not so well at the same time.
Yeah, I think typically, taking a turn to just do this is usually wrong, right? You're probably better off letting them forge that key and then getting some state rather than giving them a free turn.
Right.
But I've lost games to this card before, so it can definitely be strong in the right situation. And usually, if I have some way to Whispering Reliquary or something like that, and I can get rid of an opponent's artifact, Lash of Broken Dreams is one of the top rated artifacts for me to want to have go away.
Because it takes 2 turns to get it up and running.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, it's definitely a good target for destroying or returning to your hand.
Yep. And then the other common artifact here is the Dominator Bauble. This one is so good. You you use it, and you can use a friendly creature, and importantly, uh, this means you can use a creature that's not dis when you use the Dominator Bauble. Assuming it's ready. It doesn't say ready and use. It just says use, but it's very strong.
So most of the time, if you're using Dominator Bauble, it is to use a creature of a different house. I don't think I've ever used Dominator Bauble except for just be silly to use my disc creatures. But the Dominator Bauble is extremely useful because it says use a friendly creature. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
say fight with a friendly creature
Mm-hmm.
or reap with a friendly creature.
Right.
You can choose what to do with that creature.
Right.
So it's extremely versatile. You can use creatures that have actions. You can use creatures that have reap abilities. All this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So which in turn allows you sometimes, in the case of say something like a Ulic Megamouth from Mars, allows you to use even more creatures. So it's a really useful artifact.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. This with that or Commander Remiel, they're all really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Cool. Okay. So next one, Shooler, 5 power, so decent but not too impressive as a creature, but has the playability. If your opponent has 4 or more, steal one.
Yeah. So Shooler is a interesting creature, really
Mm-hmm.
powerful for what it does. Most of the time, if it's in my hand and I'm calling this next turn, it's not staying in my hand.
Right.
Even if my opponent has less than 4 amber, it's going out. The
Yep.
being able to steal one is definitely a huge bonus, but playing it does not depend on whether my opponent has 4 or more amber or not.
Yep.
So it being able to just get it out, use it if I be able to get that bonus steal if I can, but it's not
Yep.
incumbent on that.
So I was in a reversal tournament recently where uh, based on the deck I handed them, which really was a bad deck, someone was able to play a Shooler and then and steal from me. Subsequently, play Hysteria, which we'll come to, but it puts all the creatures back in their owner's hands. Play Shooler again, steal from me again, and then later on, after I was starting to claw back some board control, they used Arise to get to play Shooler and steal from me a third time. So yeah, it's generally it's good if it works. Not it's fine if it doesn't. And once in a while you get weird, stupid stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Next up is Pit Demon, another Stealer. So it's 5 power and action, steal one.
Yeah, pretty simple. It's important that you remember on this one that it's an action
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a reap or fight ability. Made that mistake way too many times.
Yep.
So you do need to also remember that if you do use the action to check to see if your opponent has amber in the first place. So
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, you should just reap.
yeah.
Yep.
So obviously you won't always be able to use the steal one ability, but also sometimes you would want to use this creature to fight. It is a powerful creature, so
Yep.
having 5 power, being able to remove another creature from off the board is extremely useful
Yeah.
for this one too. Because
Yep.
most of the time it will survive till the next round. So
Yep. Yeah.
yeah.
For sure. Cool. Okay. Tocsin, 3 power, and when it reaps, your opponent discards a random card from your hand. So it's just it's a recurring mind barb.
Yeah, it is an awesome card. Especially, I have 2 decks with 3 of these guys in it,
Mm,
and it is so much fun when you get all 3 out and you're just like reap, 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 and your
yeah.
opponent's hand gets cut in half.
Yeah. That's
But
crazy.
yeah, so it can get pretty crazy sometimes.
Well, yep.
it doesn't happen very often because people are pretty smart to get rid of it most of the time. This is actually one of my highest targeted cards.
Hmm.
If I need to choose between creatures to get rid of, this one's high on my list to get rid of. Definitely above like a Shooler or
Hmm.
like other creatures that are coming up later,
Yep.
including Charette. So
Yep. Yep. Okay. So next one, Ember Imp. It's tiny, 2 power, but your opponent cannot play more than 2 cards each turn. This one, yeah, this one is very high priority for murder.
hmm
Because I have been in situations where there were higher priority things, and I was only ending up with 2 cards to play anyway. Uh,
hmm
I think really importantly, it's you can't play more than 2 cards. So if you have a good board state, this isn't limiting what you can use.
right.
Um, so sometimes it's not that bad, but generally speaking, it's something I'd like to kill quickly. And once it's dead, the effect is gone, and you can move on with your play.
Yeah, especially if it takes you 2 cards to be able to destroy it.
Mhm.
And then it relieves you and you're able to play as
Yeah.
many cards as you want, or as you can.
Yep.
But there's been a few times where, say, Ember Imp is protected by Taunt or Shadow Self, that it stays out there for way longer than you want it to,
Yep.
and being able to only play 2 cards every turn and not cycle your deck, as I mentioned on the last video that we did together, cycling your deck is extremely important in this game,
Yeah.
and not being able to do that allows the controller of Ember Imp to get ahead
Yep.
and be able to use more cards
Yep.
than you. So um,
Yep.
yeah, very important to get rid of.
Yep. So next we have the Terror, another 5 power, and when you play it, if your opponent has no amber, you gain 2. I think so. This one I like in conjunction with cards like Shooler or Charette, which is the next one that are going to reduce your opponent's amber pool in the middle of the game. Um, a lot of people like to play this first turn, and I'm always really worried about that because I feel like it gives me that amber boost, but it doesn't actually give me much in the way of establishing control over the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like playing this one first because of the being able to just straight up gain 2 amber.
Hmm.
Um, but you're right. I mean, a lot of times in your little pool of 7 cards at the beginning of the game, you don't always have good options. So,
Hmm.
if this one is really honestly your best option, then getting out something like a Library of Babel or something
Hmm.
that takes a turn to set up, then yeah, I'd go for it. But yeah,
Hmm.
um, it also depends on who you're like, what deck you're playing against, of
Hmm.
course, like what houses. So
Hmm.
if you're going up against something like Shadows, who has like a couple of nerve blasts
Birch and
that they might
Ghostly
have,
Hand. Yeah.
yeah. So it's not always the
Yeah.
best thing to play first.
Yep. Okay. Next is Charette, 4 power, and when you play it, it captures 3. Good for good for slowing somebody down.
Yep, that's pretty much it. And it's not like once it gets onto the board,
Hmm.
there's not really a lot that it can do.
Yeah.
So, which is why it's not a huge priority target for me,
Hmm.
because most of the time I'm able to get 3 embers some other way. So,
Right.
if I can't destroy it right away, I'm not usually too worried about it.
Yeah, and you're
So,
thinking there's a turn down the road where Headhunter will need something to do, or I'll
right,
be wiping the board, or something like that. Sure.
exactly.
Yep.
hmm
Yep. That makes sense. I think that's a really good way to. It depends on the situation, but I think that's generally a really good way to think about it. Okay, Dust Imp, 2 amber, and when it's destroyed, you gain 2.
hmm
Um, good target for your own Hand of Dis if you can work it out that way.
Hand of Disc, Gateway to Disc,
Yeah.
Arise, putting it back out there. Dust
Yep.
Imp is basically like a delayed um, Dust Pixie. So You want to fight it. You want it to get it out, get it off the board, so that you can get that 2 amber. But of course, there is always this situation where you might want to leave it on the board to be able to reap with it and
Yep.
force your opponent to get rid of it. So there is that angle to it as well. That's not the angle I go after most of the time. A lot of times I just want to get rid of it so I can cycle the deck more,
Yeah.
get some damage onto the other side, and all that.
Right.
So
Well, and it depends, right? If bashing this against something is going to push me up to 6 or 7, then probably it's worth doing that. If not, then maybe I reap with it and say, okay, well, I gained one there, and I'll bash it into the other person's creatures later.
oh yeah. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then last of the commons, we have Succubus, 3 power, and your opponent draws one fewer card when they're refilling their hand. So if they would normally be at 6, they drop down to 5. If they also had a chain, they're dropped down to 4. Um, generally limiting their options.
Useful against cards that gain your opponent chains. So say they even gain 1 chain for using what card was it? Arias.
Mm-hmm.
You have a Succubus out, they still only draw back to 4 cards
Yeah.
because of that. So um, really great to have out. Usually it doesn't stay out for very long because your opponent realizes how it's affecting them. So
Yep.
they usually get rid of it right away. But great card to have out, especially if you're able to keep it out for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it doesn't draw too much attention because you don't realize how it's affecting you most of the time. But it's
Yeah.
definitely a high priority target.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah, I would always rather kill this before not a Shooler, but before a Tocsin, because the Tocsin is going to make me lose a card, but I'm going to get to draw that card back at the end, so I'm still getting through my deck. Whereas the Succubus is just slowing me down a little harder. So if I can only kill one of those, I'm probably going to kill the Succubus, unless I have some really high value card in my hand that I have to save till next turn. But then why didn't I play it this turn? So usually if I'm picking between the two, I'll prefer to kill the Succubus.
Right, and just in these commons, we've already seen 4 cards that affect your hand.
Yep.
Fear, Mind Barb, Toxin, and Succubus. It's
Yep.
definitely a theme in this
Yep.
house of controlling the cards in your opponent's hand.
Yep. Cool. Okay. And here's another one. Getting into the uncommons. The first one is Gongoozle. So it gains you an amber. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I'm sure it's in the dictionary somewhere. Yeah. So gains you an amber. You deal 3 damage to a creature, and if it's not destroyed, then they discard a random card from their hand. I think that's really easy to read wrong. If the creature is not destroyed, then they discard. If the creature is destroyed, they don't discard. So you kind of got to pick between finishing something off and making them discard. But pretty strong.
Yeah, a lot of times I just throw this card onto a just a high power creature that's been sitting there. Makes it easier. It makes it easier to take down later. And if it happens to stay on there, that creature usually can't attack again because it will be destroyed by attacking.
Right.
So it usually does a good enough amount of damage to be able to affect that creature. And even since it won't be destroyed, that's the best way to use this card. So.
Yep. And hey, worst case scenario, you can use this on your own dust imp, and you won't have to discard.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, next one is 3 Fates. Gain an amber, and you destroy the 3 most powerful creatures.
Definitely
pretty cool.
Not a good card if you
have
them in Brobnar in your deck.
Okay, that's fair.
It is a good card. It straight up destroys 3 creatures. But if you have some high powered creatures, and that even includes the cards, like some of the commons, like most creatures are less than 4 power. So if you have Shooler, Pit Demon, the Terror, Charette out, and those are all higher than your 10 shadows creatures your opponent has out, obviously.
Right.
exaggeration there, but you'd have to destroy your own creatures in order to get that amber. So
Right.
it's you just need to be careful when you're using it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Um, yeah, and sometimes it's very good. Depends on the situation. Yeah, there are times when it would make the most sense to just discard this and even not get the amber. But I find I'm often able to find a good way to use it. Um, and yeah, importantly, if it comes down to a tie, in other words, if you have a seven, you have a True Brew out, and then you have a couple 6 power creatures, and your opponent also has a 6 power creature, the True Brew would go right because it's the
Right.
highest, and then you go for the next two highest. Well, there's three. You get to pick which one. So you're probably going to pick your opponent's, and then you would get to pick which of yours, if that were the situation.
Yeah,
Um,
if that is the situation, being able to get rid of that high-powered Shrew is awesome. Like,
hmm
it's just such a great thing to be able to do because
Yeah.
that creature can be hard to kill off.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a good little in-house synergy there.
Yeah. 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 There is. And the next one I mentioned this earlier, Hysteria. All the creatures go back to their owner's hand.
Yeah, this is. You also have to be careful when you're playing this one. I feel like that's going to be true for most of these disc
Yeah.
cards. Um, Hysteria can be bad if your opponent has a lot of play
Yep.
abilities.
Yep.
So, say they have a bunch of Untamed out with like 2 Hunting Witches and a couple of Dust Pixies. You don't want to Hysteria that.
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
being
Or
able to play.
maybe you find a way to kill the hunting witches, but yeah, there's a lot of cards that you don't want to do this with. On the other hand, you might have a lot of play effects as well, right? So
Right,
sometimes it can balance
right.
out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Very situational, which as
Yep.
we get more into the
Yeah.
rarer cards, that will be true. But
Yep.
yeah, great card.
Yep. Cool. Tendrils of Pain. Gain an amber. Deal 1 damage to each creature. Deal an additional 3 damage to each creature if your opponent forged a key on their previous turn. Um, just because it's easy to get wrong, that means if they forged a key on their previous turn, then you're going to do a total of 4 damage to each creature, which is almost going to completely wipe the board.
Yes.
It's a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's because like I mentioned, most creatures are less than 4 power.
hmm
Most of the time, that's enough to get rid of most of them.
Right.
So, it's obviously can be best played when your opponent hasn't forged a key. It can be best played when your opponent has. So it just need to. It obviously depends on the game that you're playing it, but
Yeah.
I've never actually played this card, so I don't have any decks with this in there.
Oh,
So
nice. I got into a situation once where I was able to play 2 of them right after they forged, and that really
oh
solidly
wow,
wiped the board. Yeah, board gone.
I can imagine it. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Next one up, Keyhammer, gain an amber. If your opponent forged a key on their previous turn, unforge it. Period.
Period.
Your opponent gains 6. So not a good wild wormhole first turn card.
No, and this card's so funny because you get people that don't play the game very often playing it to gain the amber, and
hmm
then what do you know? You end up with 6 amber. There's one time I was playing. I think they played this card straight up first card of the game, and they realized it gave me 6 amber, and they left the game right away. Yeah.
we kind of fixed it. Yeah. Yep. Very
Yeah,
silly.
I was wondering why they left. I was like, dude,
Yeah.
it's like
I mean, and that's honestly that's one of the great reasons to play in person, right? Because in person, that's a very fixable,
yeah,
so easy to fix. I mean, it can be fixed online too, but a lot easier to navigate that in person.
yeah,
Yeah, so this is really good in combination with other disc cards. Um, it's sometimes it's kind of a I don't know, they unforge and then they forge the next turn. So sometimes it doesn't do much, but uh, with the right combos, it can be pretty powerful.
mm-hmm. Oh, definitely, yeah. It like being able to make your opponent unforge a key is huge because
Yeah.
it can put them back a couple turns if you
Yeah.
play it right.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so next one is Pandemonium. It gains you an amber, and then each undamaged creature captures one from its opponent. This is great for slowing the game down. Importantly,
Hmm.
the amber that's printed on it you gain before you do the playability. So, um, so that means that if you have no amber and they have some undamaged creatures, you play this, they immediately capture the amber, which isn't a big deal, especially if you can slow them down really severely, but just important to know.
Yeah, this is not a card that you want to play when you don't have many more creatures than your opponent does. So say your opponent
Yep.
has 7 creatures out and you have one, and you play this card and you're about to forge a key.
Right.
Even if it stops them from forging a key, it wasn't worth it for you because
Right.
you're stopping yourself from forging a key then too,
Right.
even more than them. So uh, obviously realizing the balance and being okay with discarding this card even though it gains you an amber is
Yeah.
is important.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Next one is Poltergeist, and Poltergeist gives you an amber, and then you use an artifact controlled by any player as if it were yours, and then you destroy that artifact. And
Important
uh-huh.
note, it does destroy your artifacts if you use them.
Right. Right.
So
And yeah. Yeah, and another important note that I was confused by at first, uh, if you want to destroy an artifact that can't be used, you can do that with this card. So if you have a speed sigil and I don't like you having a speed sigil, I can play this card. The use fizzles, but the artifact is still destroyed.
that is my favorite part of this because there are some very powerful artifacts in the game, and there's not a whole lot of artifact control.
Hmm.
So this is a great card to have,
Yeah.
to be able to just play it and it affects your opponent's artifact, as opposed to some other cards where you like Snudge or
Hmm.
Whispering Reliquary, where it takes a couple of turns to set up. This one's right away, so
Right.
you can just deal with that artifact immediately and get on with the game. And as a small bonus, it does gain you an amber as well.
Yep.
So
Yep. Cool. So next one, Lifeward. Gain an amber when you play it, and then it has Omni, which means you can use it uh, even on a turn that you're not playing this. Uh, you sacrifice it, and your opponent cannot play creatures on their next turn, which is a pretty strong limitation.
very strong. So there's sometimes you get into a situation where you're destroying your opponent's board, you're putting creatures out, setting up a strong board state on your side, you have battle lines, and you have a bunch of reap abilities or just be able to have a good battle line and take a good next turn, and you don't want them to disrupt you, you would
Hmm.
sacrifice this one to make
Yep.
sure you can get that done without needing to fight on the next turn to
Yep.
get your objective done.
Yep. Next artifact is Library of the Damned, and it has action archive a card. This I think this is the better library. It's better than Library of Babel. I think
Mm.
I think archive is stronger than drawing a card typically.
Typically,
So
right? Because
yep.
effectively, this one does the same thing, right? You archive a card that's probably not at the same house that you're playing.
Right.
So being able to draw an extra card at the end of your turn is actually just like I said, effectively the same thing as Library of Babel. You just can't use it immediately
Right.
that turn if it happens to be at the same house. So
Right. Right. And the difference is that when you draw, if it is of your same house, then great. But if it's not, then the draw didn't matter because you're going to draw up at the end of the turn anyway. So
Right.
2/3 of the time, a draw doesn't matter. Um, and not only that, but archiving lets you take cards that are situational and put them aside for the right situation. So I feel like in most cases, well, at least 2/3 of the time, maybe a little more, archive is better to have than draw.
I
That's
would
my
totally agree with that.
I did the math. Trust me. I promise.
Yeah.
Um,
I like archiving because there's literally one card in the game right now that affects archive. So it's very powerful right now to be able to
right,
archive a card. I say right now because there's going to be more cards in the future that affect your archive. But
right.
right now in Call of the Archons, archive is a very powerful mechanic.
Yep. Cool. Okay, next one is Tentacus, 5 power creature, and your opponent has to pay you an amber every time they use an artifact. In order to use the artifact, that's important. If they don't have the money, they can't use the artifact.
Yes. Very useful when your opponent has a bunch of Library of Babbles or Library of the Dams or like
Yeah.
a bunch of a bunch of artifacts that they would normally use.
Hmm.
Dominator Bauble, Lash's
Yeah.
Broken Dreams, like all these artifacts that we're talking about, and those are just the ones in Dis.
Yeah.
There's one I mentioned that wasn't in Dis, but so yeah, great
Well,
to have out on the board. A
and,
lot of
and
the time, sorry, go ahead.
no, sorry, you finish up.
A lot of times on the Crucible, if you have this creature out, this is the joys of playing online. People don't realize that they're paying you
Oh.
for artifact. So they're playing and
So,
on their turn they're like, where did all my amber go? And I'm like, yeah, you paid it to me.
so so the other thing I think for having such a it's an effect that can be nothing in certain situations. It's not going to do anything, but in other situations it can be quite oppressive. And for that, 5 power is pretty big. Like this is actually going to take work for your opponent to get rid of. So worth noting that. Um, Next one we mentioned before is Drumble. It's a 2 power. It has elusive, and when you play it, if your opponent has 7 or more, Drumble captures all of it. And so when I played at a pre-release event, I ended up in a game where I was Dis and Shadows. My opponent was, I think, Dis and Shadows and Untamed. It was crazy. Drumble happened, Keyhammer happened, and they ended up winning one of the games. But there was a game that they won that when they forged their third key, they had at least 30 amber. Uh, and that that is the kind of situation that a Drumble can take you to. So fun stuff.
Yeah, the fact that it captures all of it as opposed to down to 5 or
Right.
like whatever, is it can be pretty crazy. It's annoying. It's an annoying creature. It's only 2 power, but it's elusive, so it takes at least 2 creatures attacking it to get rid of it.
Yep.
Especially if you don't have any direct removal in your hand.
Yep.
So annoying to play against, but very amazing in some situations.
Yep. Yep. For sure. Okay. Next one is the mat. Uh, is Snudge. So Snudge is 4 power, but when Snudge fights or reaps, you return an artifact or flank creature to its owner's hand. So that's pretty strong.
So I have a deck with this and a couple of gateways to Dis in it. One thing I will usually end up doing is returning itself to my hand and playing a gateway to Dis and then putting it right back out.
Hmm.
So it has a great synergy with itself, being able to do that and dodge effects like gateway to Dis or all that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
It can be extremely useful to use it in that way. You just need to make sure to not put it in the middle of your battle line if you want to use it that way.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't be able to use it.
Yeah.
But
Huh.
yeah,
That's
a
strong.
little interesting combo.
Yeah. Yeah. You can use it on your Shoolers too.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um. Okay. And next up is Shaffles, 2 power, and at the end of your turn, your opponent loses 1. This usually won't stay on the board long.
No, the yeah, more annoyingness coming out of the imps of
Yeah.
of Dis. Um, Usually, one time of your opponent losing an amber at the end of your turn will motivate them enough to get rid of this.
Right.
Very rarely will it end up staying out long enough, and if it does, I usually question why they're keeping it out.
Well, and it is important to know it does have that effect even on the turn you play it, even though you know even though it was exhausted. Sometimes people think, oh, I have to wait a turn, but no, it does that thing right away.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
cool. Next up,
Very
oh,
useful, especially if your opponent has, say, like 6 amber, and you need to keep them off of the key. Just play this one, and
yeah,
you're good to go.
yep. Cool. Next one is Stealer of Souls. Stealer of Souls has 6 power, and after an enemy creature is destroyed fighting it, you purge that creature and gain an amber. Like um, all these types of effects, Stealer of Souls has to survive the fight in order for that to take effect. But that can be pretty strong.
Yeah, definitely. And an important note is the purging happens even if the other creature is the one attacking Stealer of Souls.
Right.
So Stealer of Souls doesn't need to be the attacker for this to
Right.
take effect.
And I think they clarified using this actually as an example in the FFG cast that if Stealer of Souls fights a bad penny, for example, the bad penny destroyed effect sends it to your opponent's hand before you can purge it, you would still gain the 1 amber, but you would not purge the bad penny.
Correct.
Unfortunately for your opponent.
Yeah.
Cool. Next up is I think this one looks a lot like he's playing a guitar, even though that's not really what's happening. But the next up is Guardian Demon, 4 power, and play fight reap. Heal up to 2 damage from a creature. Deal that amount of damage to another creature. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Unless you have a damaged creature on your side and your opponent doesn't have any creatures out, then you have to damage another creature. So
Well,
it's a mandatory.
no.
Well, heal up to. No,
Yeah,
it's
it's
not
up to.
mandatory. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's up to. So
And
yeah.
and
You just
interestingly,
whatever you want.
yeah, if you have a damaged creature, they don't have any creatures, but you have creatures with armor, you can move the damage to the creature with armor, and the armor will soak it up, so you get a net heal. So it's pretty versatile. And like one of the funnest things to do with this, in my opinion, is like go smash an Ember Imp with it, and then you get to move the 2 damage from fighting the Ember Imp onto something else.
That is true. Yeah.
Um,
I don't own any of this card, so I haven't had a ton of play experience with
mm-hmm.
it, but does seem like a really interesting card sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not. I don't think it's as strong as say a Snudge, but it can be good in the right circumstance. Um, and then last uncommon, we have Flame Wreath. It's an upgrade, gains you an amber, and the creature it's attached to gets +2 power and hazardous too. So not appealing to kill.
Yeah, definitely not. It's really cool that it gives it the creature +2 power. Being able to attach this to a creature that has a fight ability,
Mm-hmm.
so like Guardian Demon or Snudge or something like that. Especially Snudge, being able
Mm-hmm.
to attack something and survive and still be able to
Yeah.
destroy the creature it's attacking and return something, you get double your value out of it.
Yep.
So Really, really good.
Yeah, this is also a good way to counteract skirmish. Like, for example, if a bat drone attacks something with Flame Wreath, the bat drone will just die from the 2 damage before the fight takes place, and the skirmish doesn't help. But obviously, in that situation, they probably won't do that, but it's a good way to, say, keep your bat drone to itself.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, and then we are finally to the rares, um, and uh, we'll try to. These are interesting, but we'll try to blast through them here. So the first one is Guilty Hearts. It gains you an amber, and you destroy creatures with amber on them. In other words, creatures that have captured stuff.
Hmm.
So
Obviously, we're at the point where we're at the cards that are all extremely
right,
situational. So
right,
I'm not going to say that every single time I start talking about a card. This card is very obviously that.
yep,
Most of the time, it's most of the time creatures don't have amber on them, so I
right,
just play it for the amber. So
right,
it's a great card sometimes. Other times it's an amazing card. Other times it's not. So
yep.
that's the definition of situational.
I've not seen this happen in the wild, but I'm thinking Pandemonium Guilty Hearts seems very fun.
It, yes, I actually have done that combo.
Okay, nice.
It is great.
Um, okay, next is Red Hot Armor. Gain an amber, and each enemy creature with armor loses all of its armor until the end of the turn, and is dealt an amber for each point of armor it lost this way.
I like that it's guiding you sort of towards which house to use this against.
Yeah, you know what you did.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, obviously the house with the most armor is
Yeah.
Sanctum.
Yeah, and there's
Very useful against that.
also the house with the most capture, right? So there's a lot of hate going on between Dis and Sanctum.
Oh yes, yes.
Um,
Dis and Sanctum are enemies.
yep. All right, a fair game. Discard the top card of your opponent's deck and reveal their hand. You gain an amber for each card of the discarded card's house revealed this way. Your opponent repeats the preceding effect on you. So,
Very good
seems
card
fair.
to use at the end of your turn.
Right.
So if you have this card in your hand, you want to play all of your disc cards out of your hand or discard them, and then play this card because
Right.
essentially it decreases the chances of you uh,
Right.
by a third.
But
So
Mark, then it's not a fair game.
you're playing the game.
Okay. If the only way to win is not to play.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Creeping Oblivion. Gain an amber and purge up to 2 cards from a discard pile.
Yeah.
Nice.
After destroying creatures like, I don't know, hunting witch
Yeah.
of the witches,
Yeah.
being able to just get rid of them, for the rest of the game is very relieving. So
Yeah.
not needing to worry about someone arising them back to the board or anything like that. So
Yeah, and there's some times where like I don't feel like I have any great targets for this, but it's still an amber and it's not bad, so it's a
and
solid card.
it's 2 cards, so it doesn't have to be creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of powerful cards in the game that
Yep.
are not creatures. So keeping that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay, next is Dance of Doom. It's an action. You choose a number and destroy each creature with power equal to that number. It's interesting because later on we're going to see the Master of, which is similar. This is just an action, so it doesn't stay out, but it is essentially a more generalized version of that effect. Right? You get to pick the
Yeah,
number and then destroy all those creatures.
I think what this card is missing for it to be a truly great card is an amber.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you have a board full of shadows creatures on the other side of it, of
2.
you, and you just pick 2. Yeah.
Yep.
So it can be very powerful. Or Sanctum, you just pick 5 or 4, like
Yep.
something like that. So
Yep.
can be great.
Yep. Cool. Hecatomb. Gain an amber, destroy each disc creature. Each player gains 1 for each creature they controlled that was destroyed this way. So
this is kind of like a dis version of mating season,
mm-hmm.
right? So obviously, your best play is to use this when your opponent doesn't have disc creatures either in their deck or on the board. And man, being able to destroy them and gain an amber for each one, especially after, say, you reap with those creatures,
yeah,
it can be a huge amber like bomb.
yeah. I feel like this is a good way to like burst into your third key. I would be scared to do it from going into my first, right? If I have a strong board state, I probably don't want to lose it. But you know, if you have board control and then can use your creatures like you said, and then do this to push you over into the third key, it's going to be pretty strong.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Cool. Annihilation Ritual. Really funky card. Gain an amber, and then anytime a creature would enter a discard pile from play, it's purged instead. From play means essentially it was destroyed, not discarded from a hand.
And that's important because Bad Penny and Dexter, two great cards right there, do not get affected by this.
Right.
So because they don't enter the discard pile after being destroyed, those would not be affected.
Yeah.
But there can be some crazy plays happening with this card.
Yeah, I think the thing to be careful of, like, this is in the category of cards where it's very easy to do more damage to yourself than to your opponent.
It can, yes, especially if you don't have a lot of raw amber generation in your deck.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. Okay, next up, an artifact, Soul Snatcher. Each time a creature is destroyed, its owner gains 1. Also, another double-edged sword.
Yes. Soul Snatcher, I have a deck with Soul Snatcher in it that every single time I discard it because most of the time it's just not worth it. I get a lot of creatures destroyed on my side of the board in that, but also a lot of times I'm destroying my opponent's creatures and I don't want to give them amber. So boosting your opponent's amber gain is not
always sketchy.
It's always sketchy. So I usually just end up discarding it just because I don't want to deal with it. I'm sure there's a great way to use the card that I haven't figured out yet. Like being able to play this, destroy all your creatures, and then play like Poltergeist to get rid of it or something like that. So great reference to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and that, by the way.
Yes.
Then no one goes out, and yet the fires.
Yeah. That's a deep cut right there. Next artifact is a Screaming Cave. It's an
favorite card in the game.
So when you use Screaming Cave, you shuffle your hand and discard pile into your deck.
Yes, I have two decks with this card. No, 3 decks with this card actually, and is by far my favorite card in the game. The mechanic of being able to reset your hand and discard pile is insanely powerful sometimes. I say sometimes because obviously it fizzles every once in a while. You don't get anything good, or say you a lot of times you want to use this to combo disc turns. So being able to use Screaming Cave a bunch of times in a row, it can be really, really powerful. Sometimes you'll use Screaming Cave, shuffle your hand and your discard pile back into your deck, and then you just get your other 2 houses, which can be okay, but it's not ideal when you're using this one. But just being able to reset your hand and deck is awesome. Nothing else can do it in the game.
Yep. Cool. Next up is Key to Dis. It's an artifact with Omni. You sacrifice it, you destroy each creature. So basically, same as Gateway to Dis, but it doesn't have that chain penalty. It does have you have to wait a turn before you can use it. But because it has Omni, it's pretty flexible, really.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, definitely really powerful. Way better than Gateway to Dis in that it doesn't affect how many. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
affect your chains. So I really like this card.
Yep. Okay, next up is Sacrificial Altar. Gain an
Okay.
Amber, and when you play it, and then you can use it to purge a friendly human creature from play. If you do that, you play a creature from your discard pile. Um, yeah, this is almost always a non-event.
Right. I usually play it for just the Amber, and then it sits there
Yeah,
for the most part. But um, yeah, this card was the focus of a lot of upset people when the game first came out because the algorithm would put this card into decks without any human creatures in it. So they've since fixed that, thankfully. But there's quite a few decks out there, good reversal decks with Sacrificial Altar instead of human.
it's fine. It gives you an Amber. Okay. Next up is Overlord Grecking. I don't know the right way to say that, but I'm going to go with Grecking. And after it's 7 power, that's a lot. And after an enemy creature is destroyed fighting it, you put that creature into play under your control. That's cool. You make an army of zombies.
Yeah, I this creature whenever it comes out, I either start discarding creatures or like focus on it to get rid of it as fast as I can. It's not something I want
Hmm.
out for very long, especially if I have a creature with a powerful reap effect or fight
Right.
effect, or even like board presence effect like Shadow
Right.
Self. So
Yeah.
it's a great card to have on your side. Not so great if it's on the other side of you.
Yeah. Yeah. The bummer part is, with if you use it on something with like Reap or action effects, is if it's something that's not in a house you have, then you probably won't get around to using it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's still, I mean, that's still pretty strong. It means your opponent isn't going to draw them. Um, it's good. Um, Next is Tolus. Tolus is 1 power only, and it's elusive. And each time a creature is destroyed, its opponent gains 1. So it's
Yeah,
the opposite. That other one.
extremely situational again. I usually end up discarding this one too. It's another double-edged sword. Um,
Sure.
I usually just to go the easy way out, I discard it just so I don't need to think about it and focus on other things. So
Right.
there's sometimes you're able to use it and destroy it right away, but it's um, yeah, being able to know when to use it, it can be very powerful.
Right. Now, interesting, just important to note, like if this is out and someone uses, let's say, a gateway to Dis, uh, all the creatures are destroyed simultaneously, which means that by the time any creature is destroyed, this effect is no longer on the table.
Correct. That is correct. That is a very important
Yeah.
distinction.
Cool. Next one, True Baru. True Baru is 7 power. When you play it, you have to lose 3 amber to play it. It has taunt, which I often forget. Uh, and and when it's destroyed, you gain 5. So like I guess a Dust Imp on steroids if you get to use it right.
Hmm.
Um, I would not be stoked to see this in a deck. I don't love it.
I'm not a huge fan of it. Obviously, there are great ways to be able to use it. True
Mm-hmm.
Brew, Gateway to Dis, or other things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, but it is not my favorite card.
Yeah.
There's way too many ways it can go wrong, so it's not a great consistent card.
Yep. Yep. Next up, Eater of the Dead. 4 power. Uh, Fight Reap. Purge a creature from a discard pile. If you do, put a +1 power counter on Eater of the Dead. I think if you can use that purge power to great effect, that's useful. It's a slow way to be gaining power, and I don't think it's that. I don't think the power gain is all that relevant.
Hmm.
But that ability to purge a creature from the discard pile can be nice depending on the situation.
Now, obviously, the fight reap effect. If this creature fights another creature and puts it into the discard pile, it can then purge that creature in that order, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Because it'll happen after the. Actually,
After
yeah.
the
After
it
the
needs to
destroy.
survive the fight in order for it to happen. So
Yeah.
by the
Yep.
time it survives, that creature's already in the discard pile.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, not a whole lot of ways to use this card over and over again, which does, like you mentioned, make it really slow.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, but if you purge some high value targets, it can be good. Next up, a Restringantus. Only one power. It doesn't have elusive or anything, so it's very likely to die quickly. And the play effect is you choose a house. Your opponent cannot choose that house as their active house until it leaves play.
Pretty simple.
uh, so I won a game once because the person I was playing against did not realize that this effect continued indefinitely. They thought it would only happen the turn after they played it, but it actually will go on until Restringantus is destroyed. That's an important thing to note. And because of that, it's possible to play this card and you've won the game. If you happen to choose a house that they don't have any cards in their hand for,
Hmm.
and they don't have anything in the table for, uh, it is possible that the game is over at that point and you've just won. Um, it's also possible to just put them in a very difficult bind.
Yeah, like he's doing in the picture.
Yeah, yeah, thematic. Um, yeah, strong card. Importantly, uh, the way this, the way the rules have been clarified is such that if you play this and control the weak, um, oh, and I was saying it wrong actually. This says you cannot choose that house. So sorry, if you were to choose a house and that's all they have, then they would insta lose. Um,
Hmm.
uh, so at first, people were thinking if you play this with control the weak, then you say okay logos and then logos. They have to choose logos, but they can't choose logos, so they can't choose. But the rules have been clarified, so at this point, the cannot overrides the must, and
Right.
the must just disappears. It just doesn't matter at that point. So they would be able to choose one of their other two houses.
That is correct. Yes. Um, the It's a great errata to the cards
Yeah,
because just being locked out of the game is boring and
yeah,
not so.
yeah. Although it is still possible to achieve a hard lockout with Restringantus if you
Yes.
happen to, get they were overloaded and you got lucky or guessed
Hmm.
wisely.
Hmm.
Um, cool. Okay. Next, three cards. Master of 1, 2, and 3. Cool slight art changes in these. They're 4 power creatures, and I guess representing fear, apathy, and greed. And when they reap, you destroy a creature with X power, where X is which of the masters you got.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen them be used to super
Yeah,
good effect,
yeah,
but obviously being able to destroy a creature with a certain power is pretty cool.
yeah, yeah.
If you ever do get to do it.
Yeah, it seems situational. May is, it's good that it says May.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. Otherwise, you could be in a bind.
Right. Next up is Pitlord. Pitlord gains 2 amber when you play it. It has 9 power and taunt. So that's all very good. And then the downside is that while Pitlord is in play, you must choose this as your active house.
Yes. It's nice being able to actually play this card. with, against control the weak or restringentus,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not being locked out anymore. So
Right.
the 2 amber is great. Um, However, if this is the only card that you have on your side of the board and you don't have any creatures or cards of dis in your hand, it's not that great. So,
Yep. Yep. Just depends on the situation, so gotta play it wisely.
mm-hmm.
Um, Next up, Gabos Longarms, and it's 5 power. And before fight, choose a creature. Gabos Longarms deals damage to that creature rather than the one it is fighting. Very interesting.
Really cool. Really cool effect. Like being able to attack an urchin and do damage to like a smash and being able to survive that is awesome. Um, so like only getting 1 damage in return, being able to kill a 5 power creature is really really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think does that? I'm trying to double checking you here.
I don't think that they need to be neighbors. I'm pretty sure that it can target one and
Yeah,
do damage.
that's true. No, my issue with the Urchin example is Urchin has elusive, so no damage would be dealt.
Oh, because of elusive.
Yeah, but if you did this to, yeah, for example, a Dust Pixie. Um,
Correct. Yeah. Also, say
mhm.
you attack a Dust Pixie and want to kill an urchin, you'd be able to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
The damage does go through elusive.
Yep, yep, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then last one is Caller of Subordination. It's an upgrade. You control this creature.
Obey.
Yes, you must.
Uh, I've seen a few people that are newer to the game be confused about the fact that, like, why would I want to play this on my own creature?
You
The
wouldn't.
point is to not.
Yep.
You don't play this on your own creatures to play it on your opponent.
Right.
It is an important thing to remind newer players of, that you can play upgrades on any creature,
Yep.
including biomatrix backup. Like you don't want to play some of these on other creatures, but um, yeah, it is important to note that you can put upgrades on um, other creatures on your
Yep.
opponent's creatures.
Yep. Yep. For sure. Um, okay. Cool. Well, that wraps up Dis. Um,
That
they.
wraps dis up.
Oh man, yes, it does. It does. Yeah, and I think yeah, anytime you have Dis, you hope you're gonna be able to just really get in the way of what your opponent's doing, limit their options. I think of them. I know they have a lot of hate for Sanctum, but I think of them as almost the opposite of Logos, in that I think Logos is very much about, and that's the next house will do, but Logos is very much about expanding the options you have available as a player, whereas Dis is all about limiting the options that your opponent has.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about control. It's all about disrupting what your opponent wants to do. They have a plan. Dis makes sure, usually most of the time, that they can't completely do that plan. So it's a great house to have in your deck.
Yep. Cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this with me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
All right. Talk to you
I
later.
had fun. Talk to you later.